This video is a review of Chapter 6, which is an introduction to equivalent fractions and comparing fractions. So first, really quickly, in order to make an equivalent fraction, so like let's say I had 1/3 and I wanted to make an equivalent fraction, as long as I multiply or divide by the same number on the numerator and the denominator, it will make an equivalent fraction. So I can multiply this fraction by anything as long as I do the same thing to the numerator and denominator. So for example, if I wanted to multiply them by 2, then the equivalent fraction 1/3 is equivalent to 1 times 2 is 2, 3 times 2 is 6. So 1/3 is equivalent to 2/6. And I could do that with any number as long as I do it to the same thing on the top and the bottom. That is how we make an equivalent fraction. Now, if I wanted to simplify a fraction, let's say I have 4/12, and I wanted to put this in simplest form, I have to look at the number that I can divide into both 4 and 12. And we want to find the biggest number that we can divide into these two numbers, which we call that the greatest common factor, because it's going to save me some work. So I can see that if I list my factors of 4, I have 1 times 4 and 2 times 2. These are all of the factors of 4. That means those are all the numbers that I could divide 4 by. Well, looking at these, I can divide 12 by 1, 2, and 4. But the biggest number I can divide them both by is 4. So I'm going to divide them both by 4. 4 divided by 4 is 1. 12 divided by 4 is 3. So 4/12 reduces or simplifies to 1/3. Now, if you don't divide by the greatest common factor, that's okay, as long as you just keep going. So if I see, okay, these are both even, so I could divide them both by 2. 4 divided by 2 is 2. 12 divided by 2 is 6. Now I have 2/6. Now, since I know that these are both even, that means I can still divide them by a common factor. I can divide them by 2 again. 2 divided by 2 is 1. 6 divided by 2 is 3. So even if you do not divide by the greatest common factor, as long as you keep going until you cannot divide by anything else, you will get to the simplified form. All right, so the next one, so we'll just do one more example of how to simplify fractions, and this is going to be part of your assignment today. Let's say I have the number 30/36. Well, I know I can divide both of these by 6. 30 divided by 6 is 5. And since when we're simplifying, we want to also make it an equivalent fraction, we have to be able to do the same thing to the denominator. So 36 divided by 6 is 6. And that means my simplified form is 5/6. Now, the next part of your assignment is finding the least common denominator. We need to be able to make common denominators for our next chapter, which is all about adding and subtracting fractions, and you cannot do that without finding common denominators. So in order to find common denominators, I'm actually going to switch to this one first. In order to find common denominators, we're going to list the multiples. So for common denominators, we do the multiples. Simplifying fractions, we do factors. These ones we're doing common multiples. So I'm going to list the multiples of 8. So the multiples of 8 are 8, 16, 24, 32, and 40. And I always do about 5 to start off with. Multiples of 3, I have 3, 6, 9, 12, 15. I still don't have a common multiple, so I'm going to keep going. 18, 21, 24. Oh, you know what? Now I have a common multiple. So that means that my least common denominator is going to be 24. That's the first number that they both have in common. So I'm going to do one more of these ones. So we have 6 and we have 10. So if I list my multiples of 6, that's 6, 12, 18, 24, 30. That's my first 5. And then if I go on my 10s, I have 10, 20, 30. Well, I can stop right now because this is the first number that they both have in common. So that means my least common denominator will be 30. Okay, now the same thing applies if you have more than one denominator. So on these ones, we have 3 different fractions. Same process. Now I'm going to skip this one because these have the same denominators here. So I'm going to go down to this one that they have 3 different denominators. Okay, now this could get a little bit tricky. So when we're doing this, I'm going to list my multiples of 10. That's, so I'm going to go 10, 8, and 3. Neither one of those can go into that one. 20, still can't be divided by 8. 30, still not. 40, no, because 8 can go into 40, but 3 cannot go into 40. So we'll try 50, no. 60, no. 70, no. 80, well, 8 can go into it and 10 can go into it, but 3 cannot. 90 does not work. 100 does not work. 110 does not work. 120, there's my basic fact of 12. So I know that 3 will go into it, 10 will go into it, and 8 will also go into it. So to figure out how many times, and so then I would just check that. And if you aren't sure if 8s are going to go in, you can look at this. We know that 8 goes into 40. We know that 8 goes into 80. So the next one would be 120. So this would be 5 times, 10 times, and this would be 15 times. All right, so let's try one more that has 3 different denominators, which would be, I'm going to go ahead and try this one actually. So 4, 5s, and 5s. So I'm going to list my multiples of 5. So there's 5. 4 can't go into that one. 10, no. 15, no. 20, yes. So on these ones, you can just list the multiples of one of your fractions and keep listing them until you have one that the other number will go into, which is why I just listed the multiples of 5. Now I could go ahead and list the multiples of 4, 4, 8, 12, 16, 20, and I would get to the same thing. It can save you a step if you I like to choose my largest denominator and list the multiples because then I'll be able to find out which number it goes in first. So the least common denominator would be 20. So this concludes our review of how to simplify fractions. When you're doing this assignment, there are text boxes above and below the fraction line. So you're just going to have to click on each little box, or there should be a box above and below. So make sure you click twice on this. So the first time you're just going to type in your numerator. The one down here, you're just going to type in your denominator to make the fractions. On these problems, all you have to do is type in the whole number denominator. So just like what we did here, you would just type in 20 in that box, or 120 in the box. Then same thing on this one. And then the last one, you just have 3 fractions. Same thing though, you're just finding the least common denominator. Then on tomorrow's review, we're going to focus a lot on comparing fractions and putting them in order. I hope this helps. If you have any questions, please reach out to me. Have a great night. Bye.